Live from Surprise in Arizona. Hope you're having a super fantastic sparkling day. Welcome to Before the Dirt Nap podcast number 2018. Boy, that was a year of stretching and growing, I can tell you. Tonight's topic is the unexpected stories hidden in your family tree. I love stories. I am a storyteller that's been passed down through my genes, through the DNA to be a storyteller. Our question for you tonight is, what is the most unexpected thing you have discovered about your family? So now let's close that down and go to my other notes over here so I can remember my talking points. But I hope you've all had a great day. And, you know, one thing that I love, that I absolutely love about, I love all aspects of genealogy, but one of the things I love is when you find these hidden stories. That is why one of our taglines at the beginning was something about, what was our first tagline that we had? We make fun, we have fun digging around your family tree and uncovering the hidden stories, or something like that. I'll have to remember on that one. I'll have to go look it up at some point, not tonight. We're here for here. Tonight we're going to be talking about unexpected twists and turns that genealogy can reveal. Stories of resilience, mystery, deep emotional connections, and some of the discoveries change the way people see themselves forever. And I will tell you this, there have been stories that, always come up and you're sort of like, no way. That just sounds so weird. There's no way it can be true. But always remember, and this is one of my favorite quotes. I've got to learn the actual quote. But to paraphrase Mark Twain, truth is stranger than fiction. That's why fiction has to make sense. And when you see some of these stories, like if you take, for example, when you see these made-for-TV movies that are based on true events, they have had to fictionalize the actual story because the real story you wouldn't believe. You're more likely to believe the way that they make the movie make sense, because the true story would leave you going, yeah, no, I don't think so. But some of those made-for-TV movies, if you dive into the actual real story, it's sort of like, you got to be kidding me. They can be very different to what you have seen on screen. Yes, there may be some truth in there, but when you actually see the real story, this is why I love memoirs and biographies and all of that sort of stuff. Right now I am reading, what am I listening to? I am listening to Shakespeare, The Man Who Paid the Rent. And it's Dame Judi Dench's story of, and it's actually a really cool way they have done this. So this guy, I wasn't even going to talk about this tonight, but here we are. One of the authors of the book actually spent 4 years interviewing Dame Judi about Shakespeare. Now, she is an incredible actress. She actually has a photographic memory, and she can quote Shakespeare like nobody can. She's been in probably about all of the different Shakespeare plays and everything else. And so her memory is really good. She can even tell you the costume she was. And the guy goes into this all at the beginning of the book about how well she remembers the costumes, who played what role, when she was on stage, what stage she was on, the dates that she was on. She can remember all of these like that. And he spent 4 years interviewing her about her roles in Shakespeare, and they did some discussion on Shakespeare. The only Shakespeare thing that I did in high school was that we read Macbeth. I at one point knew the entire opening scene with the 3 hags around the cauldron. I totally memorized that, the whole thing. Could I do it now? Absolutely not. My memory's not that good, but I have a good memory. But I do remember that I did at one point have that. While we're doing Macbeth, I could quote that entire opening scene with all 3 witches, all 3 of their parts. But Judi Dench, they go through the different Shakespeare plays, and she talks even about the stuff that happened off stage that you didn't get to see, or things that happened on stage that weren't supposed to happen, but got a good reaction from the audience that they left it in. Like if somebody made a mistake on stage, the audience didn't know, because every director had their own interpretation on how to perform the Shakespeare play. And that came out a lot, because there was some roles that she did several times with different directors, And she talked about how each director brought their own thing to the play, which was kind of cool in a way. It was really cool. And it's a very interesting book to listen to, because now I'm learning more and more and more about Shakespeare. And I'm sort of like, I really want to go read that. Oh, I want to go read that. And we've been through the 12th Night. Macbeth we did, been through the 12th Night. Is it the 12th Night? Midsummer Night's Dream. Now we're on the chapter about the Merchant of Venice. But listening to them, just having this discussion about the plays and what she remembers about them, and I'm learning different things about acting too, about putting the pauses in there and different terminology, which I've got to go back and take notes on because I can't remember what all the terminology is. But there's different things where it's the way it's delivered, it is left open to interpretation to the audience. And then there's areas where it's closed off because there is a specific reason they want you to see it that way. So that it's not open to interpretation. And it's just very interesting learning about all these different behind the scenes things for for a Shakespeare play. So if you want to go, if you want a really cool book to listen, now Dame Judi Dench doesn't read it herself. She does do an intro at the beginning, and she does make several voice appearances throughout the audio book. But she's got two people. There's Brendan, who's the one that did the interviews, and then Barbara is reading like Judy's portion of it. Because he said she's a very hard woman to pin down. She is always on the go. And it took him 4 years to get enough interviews together to be able to put this book together. 4 years of interviews. But she talks about it right at the beginning, at the introduction there, and then you hear her come in at different parts as she recites the scenes that she did, or does the script from the plays that she did and that sort of thing too. So you can find all sorts of different stories and things. I don't even know how I even got onto that, but anyway, so we're going back. Oh, the truth is stranger than fiction. That's why I love memories and biographies. Yes, totally love that. Because you get to hear when you're reading a nonfiction book, you get the truth. You don't get the fiction. It's not going to make sense. So sorry, I got itchy nose. So when you're reading reading or listening to memoirs, biographies, those sorts of books, you get the truth. You get the true stories coming out, and some of them are going to like blow your mind and things like that. So with that, we're going to go through some of the stories that we have. I've got, what did I put on my notes? 3. We've got 3 stories that I've done with clients. So just to give you an idea of why we go looking, why do we go looking for stories? We want to know about their life. Who were they? They are more than just a name on a family tree with some dates. They are more than that. They are not just a name and dates. They are people who actually lived and had a life. And by finding their story and learning more about them, you get to see the sort of person that they were in the era that they lived in. And sometimes you might get a glimpse into what life was like during that time, but you get to meet your ancestors through the stories that we can uncover. So with that, our story number 1, the long lost relatives and a legacy of survival. We had a client come to us one time with almost no information. They had a name and a location, and that's about it. They had the hope that somewhere out there lost relatives were waiting to be found. We uncovered more than just a family tree. It was a story of survival. Basically, how we start with anything, we start with what our clients know. What information do they have? What do they know? What stories have they heard? Because sometimes when you hear a story that's been passed down through generations, there is an ounce of truth in them. Our job is to uncover what that truth is, and then separate the truth from the fiction, and then expand on the truth and find out more details. So when I do a discovery call with people, is that I sit there with the client or potential client, because the discovery call is, what is it that they're looking, and we're asking questions. Who is it that you're looking for? What information are you looking for? What information do you have to start with? And we just have a general conversation. And we do record them, because that way we can spend time honing in on the client and listening to their story and what it is they want to get out, instead of just rapid firing questions at them. The questions are going to come naturally as we discuss the person that they're looking for. I'm taking some notes, but I know I have the recording going so I can go back and listen. But the reason that I also take notes is if something happens to the recording, I still have the notes. But the recording I can use to go back and backfill in the notes as well, and give me a little cushion in there. Sometimes I get really wise and I will do I'll have a second recording going at the same time. But basically, I'm looking for what information are they looking for, what information do they have, and where we go from there. And as we're going through this conversation of the discovery call, at the end, I turn around and we talk about, okay, this is what we can do for you. This is what it's going to cost. This is what we're going to do for you. And we will drop the contract and send it to them at the end of the call. And we usually send the contract out within 24 hours. So this one came to us with just a name and a location, and a kind of sort of around this time period. Sometimes we can kind of do a guesstimate on the time period based on what is the relationship to this person. If it is because you've got basically every 20 to 25 years, you've got a new generation. So, if you've got somebody who's in their 40s and it's their second great grandparents, you've got to think, okay, so parents will be around, they're in their 40s, parents will be around 65 years ago. And we start just sort of like tracing back in time, and we get a time period that way. And they also might have a time period as well. So we trace their, so when we were talking to this person where they just had the name and the location, and I hope that somewhere out there were some lost relatives waiting to be found, we uncovered more than just the family tree. We uncovered a story of survival, what this person had been through. We traced their lineage back to their third great grandparents. They were only looking at that point. This one was looking for their great grandparents. So we went back 2 further generations. We discovered a past marked by persecution and resilience. They were being persecuted because of their religious beliefs. That started their migration story. Their ancestors fled from hardship, leaving behind a homeland in turmoil because of the persecution against their religion. And against all odds, they managed to escape that country with their lives. They managed to survive, and they literally had to sneak out in the middle of the night. And then they found a new country. And then the next country they went to, they had to quietly go through there because they had not gone through any border patrols or anything like this. This is sneaking through. They were sneaking through woods to get from one country to another. They were having to avoid patrols. Just an incredible, incredible story of their determination to get their family out of the country they were in. And they wanted to get to a new country. They finally got to a new country where they were able to settle for a little bit, but then that wasn't their ultimate goal where they wanted to go. But through our research, the client reconnected with living relatives they never knew existed. Not only did we uncover their story of persecution and resilience and their survival against the odds as they are literally walking blindly through forests and woods and over hills and everything else, just to escape the persecution that they were suffering. They had family members that they had to leave behind. It was just their nucleus family. It was mum and dad and their, how many children? It was either 5 or 6 children they took with them. But they left behind their parents, their siblings, and just basically took off in the dead of night. They left in the middle of the night and ran. And their story it was just an incredible. And somebody had actually at some point in time written a journal entry about these, because they helped them. There were people along the way that helped them escape and gave them shelter and food and that along the way. And in somebody's journal along the way, we found a journal that actually had an entry in there about the family and what they had been through so far, because somebody had actually taken the time to not only talk to them, but record about this family and where they had come from and why they had left. And so we were able to find the story, which was really cool. And this was somebody who was kind of on the underground side of things, the Underground Railroad, or whatever they were calling it back then. I don't know. But whatever it was called back then, they had these people who would help them along the way. And then this family would get to the next family. And they they didn't even have it set up or anything else. It got to the point where they had to leave right then and there. And they were ready to go. They were just waiting to find for the guide. They were waiting for a person to guide them. And the person didn't show up. And, well, they weren't going to be showing up for another, I think it was, I'm trying to remember what the journal said. The journal said that the guide was supposed to be showing up in 2 days, and it got to the point where they could not wait the 2 days for the guide to show up. So they had to go by themselves, not knowing exactly where they were heading, because the guide was going to take them to one station, and then that station would take them to the next station, and so forth. They had to find that, and the guide had kind of given them some clues, and that was all they had. And so they left in the dead of the night, and took off in the direction that they would have been going with the guide, not knowing about patrols or anything else. And suddenly, hearing a patrol coming and just hiding in the bushes and things and trying to keep the kids quiet until the patrols had passed and they could then move on to the next thing. And they missed the first station, but somehow found the second one. And that's where that journal entry had been written. The fact that they found the second station when they didn't even know where the second station was, it's that the stations were aware that this family was going to be coming through in 2 days, or 3 days, whatever the time frame was from once they got to the first station to get to the second station. But they somehow, through divine intervention, that's all we're going to put down. They got led to the second station, and from then on, they had guides to help them get the rest of the way. But an incredible, incredible story. And so through the research, we were able to reconnect them with living relatives and these were the people that family had left behind that had then had their own escapes from that country and made their way. And some of them, this was the crazy part. The client had been to school with her cousin, and they were best mates and had no clue that their friendship had lasted over the years and everything else. They were like best buds all through the years. They'd been maids of honors at each other's weddings and everything else, and nobody knew that they were related until we stumbled across this story, and then it all started falling into place. Craziest stories, but true. And this is what I love about it, because I mean, we were like, this was unbelievable. Basically we're sitting there, this is unbelievable. Oh my gosh, I can't believe this, and da 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 da. But your family's past is more than just names on paper. It's a testament to survival, strength, and connection. Is what we can take away from that story. Defying the odds. What are they? There couldn't be anything more than divine intervention for them to get to the second station without missing the first station, having to go blindly into the great yonder, not just knowing the direction they were going, and having to stumble across the second station. And from then on, they were able to move a little more freely. But that first few days of them before they got there was just like, so that was story number one. Story number two is a father's childhood and the quest for answers. If I asked you questions about your parents' childhoods, what could they tell you? What stories do you know from your parents' childhoods? That's always a good question. And what if I told you that a simple question about your parents' past could unlock a world of discovery? And that's what happened when we had a woman come to us, hoping to learn more about her father's childhood. He was past. She had very little. All she had was the information that she knew of him as she was growing up. And, when she got married and all that sort of stuff, she had no idea about her father's childhood. He never spoke about it. And then before he passed away, she started hearing little bits and pieces coming out. But it was just a sentence here and a sentence there. And then she was left with these pieces to try and put together. So we took those little pieces and we pulled them together. We took all of her information, her mother's past as well. So there's just her, and her and her siblings. And so we took one information that they had gathered together from things that their father had said or things their mother had said that kind of hinted back to stuff in their father's childhood. So we took these little bits of pieces and we started going through the historical records. We found their marriage certificate. They actually had a copy of the marriage certificate, which was awesome. So that gave us another place to start, because it's a marriage certificate and on there was listed the father's names, her father and his father. So, but we were concentrating on the father. So listed on the marriage certificate was our client's grandfather's name. So we had another piece of the puzzle. And they had heard of their mother's name, of his mother's name, but they weren't sure if that was actually her name or not. And I'm sort of like, you're not sure? And they says no, because we never met our grandparents. There's some details that there was some scandal or something involving the child, involving her father, but they never knew what it was. We eventually, through digging through historical records, census data, personal accounts, the little pieces that they had started falling into place and filling in these little gaps, and then we started filling in the bigger gaps, and we led to the journey led us to answers, connections, and closure. The childhood was not the greatest childhood. We found the birth parents' names. The child was not really given up for adoption, but given to another family to raise. There was no formal adoption. So her father was raised by another family within the family. So it was given to another family member to raise, but there was no formal adoption. So he actually kept his birth. No, he didn't keep his birth name. His last name was changed to the family that he was living with. But we actually found a census report that he was on, but he had a different last name, and we weren't sure if it was him or not. So then we had to go through and prove that person on the census data, because it had the same first name, was the same age, born in the same area, and all these details were matching up, but the last name was different. And then we found a letter. We found a letter. A relative had a letter, and in that letter had been written by the father of the child to state that the mother was in a no-fit state to raise this child. He was removing the son out of the household. He basically left his wife and took the boy, but he couldn't raise the boy himself, so he gave him to a family member on his side of the family to raise. So we found this letter, and in there we found a first name for her. So now we started looking through birth records, because we had his last name on there. We started looking through the birth records and found their birth record. Oh my gosh, it was it was a very great day. I mean, you go on a roller coaster ride with genealogy, but to find that letter, to find out what had happened, in that the mother was not in a fit state. It didn't say why she wasn't in a fit state, it just said that she was not in a fit state, was incapable of taking care of the child. So the father had decided to leave her to deal with her stuff, took the child and gave that child to another thing. Then went back and in the letter it says, I'm going to go back and tell her that her child is dead. But it's basically what they told the mother, is that the child was dead. So as far as she was concerned, her child was dead. So she never went looking for her child. It was just crazy, crazy stories. And so through that, we were able to get back to who the birth parents were for her father. So we found her grandparents and their records and things, and found out that the mother had actually been in a mental institution for a number of years. And she went into the institution after the father went back and told her son was dead. He basically told her son was dead so that she would move on and not go looking for the child. And so that was kind of a very sad story to find, but it gave a lot of closure, and it explained a lot of things and a lot of bits and pieces that they had heard throughout the years. The kids, her and her siblings, were very, very happy to have that closure. And I know that in my own family, my grandfather never talked about his time in the war. It was too traumatic for him to talk about. I didn't find out till we were living in Virginia at the time. I think we were living in Virginia at the time when I found out all the stuff that my grandfather had been through and why he never talked about it. So I was in my 40s when I found out why my grandfather never talked about his time in the war, in World War II. Whereas my grandmother, you couldn't shut her up. But it was part of this journey, looking for this woman's father's early childhood records, was asking a lot of questions, not just from her, but also to her siblings, because her siblings had heard different pieces of the puzzle over the years. There was just a little bit that was dropped here, a little bit that was dropped there. Then they also had an aunt. I forgot about the aunt. The aunt she had a little more information, but it wasn't actually their true aunt. She turned out to be a cousin, because, but the kids thought they were an aunt because they thought that that was their father's sister. Not, but turned out that she was a cousin who who actually remembered when he was dropped off at the house. And so yeah, the aunt was still around, memory a little fuzzy, so they talked gently with her about their father, and she was able to give us a little more information to go on as well. But she, even though her mind was going, she still remembered the day that he came to the house. She was 6 or 7 at the time when their father was brought to their house and told that he was going to be their sibling from now on. But there was never any formal adoption either, so we had no records that we could go look up for that. But we got back there in the end and were able to fill in some blanks for the client and her siblings that gave them closure. So that's the second story. So sometimes people the closest to us have untold stories, and asking the right questions can bring us closer, even if they're no longer with us. So that was probably one of the longest ones I've done. But with all my clients, I say they're the longest one because I still go back through my clients' trees every now and again and just look for another piece of information for them. Is there any more information that's come online, any more records we've got access to? In 2022, we had the 1950 census come out. So I was able to go and look up information that I could put into my clients' trees for those that were part of in the US at the time, and fill in some more gaps for them on that part. So yeah, it was interesting. It's always fun. And I now got to go check out the 1921 census in England. I haven't done that yet. That just got released last month. But the English hold them 104 years. They want to make sure everybody on the census is dead. On the 1950 census, if you're ever looking through there, you will see that some names have been redacted. The names that have been redacted are people who are still living. How often they go through and remove the redactions, I don't know. But if you come across the 1950 census, even the 1940 census, and see some ones with black lines through them, it means that person is still living. And it could be a relative that you're looking for, because you match up everybody else that has already passed, and now you've got this black line in the middle of it, and maybe that's where your living relative is, right there. You never know. But anyway, let's see. Story number 3. So we've got our first 2 stories. Story number 3, tracing roots to the 1500s and a historic connection. This is one of my absolute favorite stories, and only because it was, we started at the second great-grandmother and just started working back. And every time we went back to the next generation, there was these stories that we kept finding, and we were supported by newspaper articles and other documentation, and by historical records, by newspaper articles, by articles actually written by the people who it happened with, who actually went through the event. And then we'll go back to the next generation, and there'll be more stories coming out. It was, I think we've gone back to the 5th. We're still on the 4th. Well, I think we're still on the 4th great-grandparents. Kind of a little nervous about going back to the 5th one, seeing what story's going, because everything we have come across, and we've gone back to early 1600s, late 1500s with this family, just this one branch of the tree, one trunk of the tree. And we've uncovered historical connections to two famous historical people. We have uncovered a connection to a major historical event, and the ancestors. I mean, the ancestors' stories. No scriptwriter could write this for a movie. We've got historical events. We've got connections to historical famous people. We've got kidnappings in there. We've got heartbreaking reunions. We've got stories of survival in there. That's all in there. It's, you think of a topic that a book could be written about, and it's probably in that family. So we had a really good base to build upon at that point, because she says, oh, in my family, my second great-grandmother has this particular last name. And there's a rumor that we are related to this particular person. I said, well, you will not be a direct descendant of that particular person because he never had any kids. And she's like, oh, thank goodness for that. So we started looking into this family, and this family, and the last name of this family is very well known. And so we started looking back, and it was sort of like, forget the guy over there that they may be a cousin, may have a connection to as a cousin. We're going to stay in this family tree here, because there is so much to unpack, and we've unpacked the basics. We haven't, And at one point, her third great grandfather, I think it was for his 80th birthday, there was a three-part article written that he had written. He had written this article, and it was in 3 parts in celebration of his 80th birthday. And it talked about him as a child and who he tried to emulate, which is a famous historical person. And that historical person was very well known within this family. So much so that the third great grandmother was a sister-in-law to this historical person's daughter and niece. Her brothers had married the daughter and the niece of this famous person. And just how he tried to emulate him, he talked about how he came across his wife, even stating in the article that she was not the most attractive woman he had ever seen. And I'm just sort of like, wait, what? But she was his best friend's sister. I'm like, okay, all right then. Not the most thrilling, not the best way to describe your wife, but okay. She was not the most attractive woman. I was like, wait, what? Who would say that about their wives? And then, so it talked about his childhood. It talked about meeting his wife and then having their children and then moving from one state to another and founding how they came to found this particular county in the next state that they moved to, and how his dad, and this famous person were all there in that area scouting out places for them to build their homes. And they were gone for a year. There was a year before they went back to pick up their families and move them. The land that they had, the reason they had to move was that their land that they had been living on was reclaimed by the government. The government came in and says, "No, you guys have got to leave. We're taking this land back." So it was sort of like, really? And we haven't found. That's the story that was heard, and it was a story that this guy had written in his article, but we haven't found the documents yet to back that up. So right now, that's a rumor. But he wrote about it, so he was involved He's firsthand experience, so we got to kind of take it, but we would like to have other backup to go with it. And then his mother was kidnapped by Indians when he was 1 year old, and it was hang on. Was it that one? Hang on. No, his father was kidnapped. His father's mother was kidnapped by Indians when his father was a year old. That's going back to the fourth great grandparents. So there's just all these stories in there. And then you go off on the side shoot and there's a name that popped up and I thought, that name looks very familiar. And so then I did some research and thought, oh, I wonder if they're connected to that historical event. And so we're still digging, but this particular person, so the third great grandfather, or was it the second great grandfather? It's either the third great grandfather or the second great grandfather had a brother whose daughter married into a family. This family is very well known for a particular incident that took place. And so looking back through the things, we're not 100% sure if the guy she married is actually part of the incident that took place, but he was born in the area where the incident took place. So we're still doing some digging into that area, but there could be, we're like about 95% sure that there is a connection to that historical event and that he was part of that incident that took place. But he was actually removed from it because he had left that area, but he was part of that family that the incident took place. And he wasn't living there at the time when it took place, but he was from that family. That's what we found out so far. So, this is just one branch of that, one trunk of that tree. And it's just the stories. And I'm scared to go back to the next generation because I don't know what I'm going to find there as far as stories go. But your roots may appear deeper than you think. And history isn't just something that happened to other people. It's part of your own story. And this is what makes genealogy so fascinating, is because you come across these different historical events. Then you find out that you have an ancestor that is involved in that event. And you're like, wow. And you now have a personal connection to that historical event because you actually had an ancestor that participated in that event. So maybe they had they left some documents behind. Maybe there's some historical documents that will give you more information about what happened at that event and what took place and everything else. Because some events are very well documented and have a lot of names in there, and you can actually go searching for the names and things like that. And so that's into story number 3. So yeah, your roots may be deeper than you think, and history isn't just about what happened to other people. It's part of your own story. So why not go and look for those connections to historical events, especially if you had people, you know, that you had ancestors or other family members living in that area at the time that event took place. Was anybody involved in it? Were they not? You know, tomorrow is Super Bowl. And I thought, wonder how many of you out there are related to an NFL player who won a Super Bowl. There's a question for you. Do you have anybody in your family or ancestry, because Super Bowl's been going for a long time, who may have played in a Super Bowl and won, or been on the other team? Do you have any connections to any sporting event where you had an ancestor participating in a sporting event where they, like the Olympics, where they may have won gold or they competed, but they didn't place? What was their story? Or they, in some World Series game, like for baseball or hockey or American football, rugby, golf, what's the other ones out there? Basketball. We've got basketball, March Madness coming up next month. So check out your family tree. Do you have anybody in there who was athletic? Maybe you're athletic. Where did your athletic skills come from? Was it inherited, passed down through generations? Did you have anybody who was involved in major sporting games and things like that? Cricket's another one. There was actually one time on the New Zealand team, there was a father and son playing together on the same team. So I thought that was kind of cool. And cricket's so popular in New Zealand that one time there was a cricketing family, the Crow family, and they took over Mount Eden, which is basically where they kind of play rugby. That they took it over one night for a backyard game of cricket, and the players were all mic'd up, which made it even fun. And they had the two Crow brothers were playing against each other and had their own players on the team. And one of them had the father of a cricket player, and the son was playing on the opposite team. So they had father and son and brothers against each other. And it was a really cool game to watch. And like I said, everybody was mic'd up. So you got to hear all the commentary that was going on, all the talking that was going on down there, whether or not they were going to run between the wickets or not. And there was actually a really cool game because it was very relaxed. It wasn't as serious as a normal game of cricket. It was just very relaxed, a lot of fun going on, a lot of jokes going around, and it was a great game to watch. It was awesome. And I wish they had made it like an annual event or something, but it was a pretty cool thing. So do you have any relatives that were involved in any sports, any major sports? Did they make it through to the finals or World Series or whatever the World Cups or whatever of those sports? You never know until you go looking. And not every discovery is joyful. Some are shocking. Some bring tears. And some challenge the way we've always seen our families. We've helped clients uncover hidden adoptions, long lost siblings, and even unexpected cultural or ethnic backgrounds. Yep, we found people who had a Jewish background and didn't even know it. Yep, we found that one too. Because in the story of this, in the first story where they were running from persecution, they were a Jewish family, and the people today did not know that their family used to be Jewish. It had kind of been hidden away. Every family has its secrets, but each discovery adds to the rich tapestry of who we are. Life is made of a beautiful tapestry, and there's a roller coaster of emotions that our tapestry goes through. It reflects in our tapestry. It reflects in our past. But why is it important? Because understanding our past can help us embrace the future. So be prepared for surprises, because genealogy is more than research. It's a journey of identity and connection. So with that, we're out of here. So what's the most unexpected thing you've discovered about your family? We'd love to hear your stories. Leave them in the comments. Send us a message. Visit us at yourfamilytree.com and start your own journey of discovering. So with that, we are out of here. Go out, have a super fantastic, sparkling evening, and we will catch you guys back here tomorrow.